dedicated to southern and eastern Kentucky. This is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. A Kentucky commission is exploring ways to administer money won in a settlement with opioid companies. That includes looking at a currently illegal substance called Ibogaine. Jeremy Toms was at a public hearing this morning and has more.
Monday's Opioid Abatement Advisory Commission hearing focused on the science and research behind a naturally occurring substance known as Ibogaine. The commission brought in experts on the substance from around the country as they consider funding the use of Ibogaine as a treatment for opioid use disorder. Ibogaine comes from an African plant and is currently an illegal substance in the United States, containing psychedelic effects. But Dr. Deborah Mash got FDA approval to research the drug as far back as the 1990s and has spent 30 years studying its anti-addictive qualities.
We will be able to prove in effective and well-designed clinical trials that this drug is transformative.
Dr. Mash points out the societal cost of opioids is in the trillions each year, with Kentucky fourth highest out of 38 states.
If you look at fentanyl, it's a chemical weapon attack on our country. And if we put this in context, it's equivalent of a plane crash a day in the United States of people dying.
These doctors say the only way for people to get the treatment now is by leaving the country. But the commission's funding would help to support their research that could eventually bring it here. Dr. Mash says Ibogaine's best quality is preventing relapse and adds it should be available alongside other treatments.
So that's the hope, that we would be able to fit in the box so patients would have another alternative.
And the commission's proposal would allocate $42 million in funding over the next 6 years. Their next public hearing is slated for September 15th. In Frankfort, Jeremy Toms, WKYT.
The drug would be given by tablet, kicking in within 45 minutes, and its psychoactive effects would last 4 to 8 hours. A UK student is dead after a weekend crash in northern Kentucky. Boone County Sheriff's deputies responded to the scene in the southbound lanes of I-75 early yesterday morning. Once on the scene, they found 18-year-old Lauren Collins. Collins was taken to the University of Cincinnati Hospital, where she later died. Collins had been attending the University of Kentucky since last year. Deputies believe a tire struck her windshield when it broke away from another vehicle.
Well, we continue to watch the possibility for strong to severe thunderstorms a little bit later on this evening. We had some storms earlier up into portions of West Virginia. They moved out, but the northwestern corner of the area still remains in a level 2 slight risk for severe weather. As we head through tonight, everybody else just about in a level 1 marginal risk. So everybody has at least a small chance for a strong storm later this evening. But the better chance is from a line northwest of a line from Monticello to London to Jackson and up to Louisa. What's the main threat? Well, tornado threat is very, very low. It's never ever zero, but it is very close to it tonight. Hail threat mainly farther west, and the biggest threat's going to be for winds gusting 60 miles per hour better, along with heavy rain. Everybody's under a level 1 marginal risk for excessive rainfall tonight. We're also dealing with Canadian wildfire smoke. It's a busy evening here in the Weather Office. Pikeville Medical Center sitting at 80 right now with the hazy sunshine in place. They're a little cooler. They saw some downpours earlier toward Lake Cumberland. It's a little warmer, 86 out there. How about 87 Middlesboro, Manchester, 88 in Harlan with dew points in the middle and upper 60s. It feels very muggy outside. There's our storms in West Virginia. They're now off toward Beckley and Bluefield over the next little bit, but we're keeping an eye on what's going on in portions of central Illinois and into central Indiana, where storms are already going up west of Indianapolis. That's where we have to keep an eye for the potential for storms to eventually move into our region a little bit later on tonight. I'll have the very latest on when those storms could move in a few minutes. Steve?
All right, Evan, thank you. A small plane landed on its belly with no landing gear at Martha's Vineyard Airport this past weekend. The 6-seater aircraft was carrying a pilot and 1 passenger, both from Connecticut, when it landed on Saturday. The 80-year-old man who was piloting the plane suffered a medical condition as the plane approached the airport. The passenger had minor injuries, but The pilot was airlifted to Boston for treatment. A strike by UPS workers could be one of the costliest in U.S. history. A study from Anderson Economic Group found a 10-day work stoppage would have a $7 billion impact. That includes $4 billion in losses by customers. The Teamsters are demanding pay increases, especially for part-time workers. They have promised to strike if they cannot reach an agreement by the end of the month. Only 6 Republican presidential candidates are qualified at the moment for the first GOP primary debate next month. Former President Trump is one of them, but with a big lead in polling and fundraising, it's possible he may skip out. CBS's Skyler Henry has the latest fundraising numbers and what the Biden campaign is keeping its eye on.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis criticized President Biden at the Christians United for Israel summit in Virginia on Monday.
Biden does not know what he's doing.
But if the Republican presidential candidate wants to take on Mr. Biden in the general election next year, he needs to focus first on former President Trump. New fundraising numbers match the polls, showing Trump with a major financial advantage over his GOP rivals. Trump raised $35 million from April to June, while DeSantis took in around $20 million. No one else brought in more than $8 million.
The great silent majority is rising like never before.
Trump still hasn't said whether he'll attend next month's debate, which could hinder any opponent's chances at landing any significant blows against him.
In this Republican primary, there is one lane to the nomination, and that lane is right through Donald Trump. He's at the head of it.
On the Democratic side, President Biden and the DNC reported a $72 million haul in the second quarter. So while money isn't an issue for the Democrats, they're closely watching the No Labels organization. The group, which bills itself as bipartisan, is pondering a third-party run, possibly led by Senator Joe Manchin, the moderate Democrat from West Virginia. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Washington.
Now, Manchin is headlining a town hall this evening in New Hampshire. No Labels co-chairperson Joe Lieberman insisted yesterday the group will stay out of the 2024 U.S. presidential race if polling shows its candidate would play a spoiler role by helping to elect either the Democrat or Republican nominee. The Senate has gone on a confirmation spree this summer, appointing several new judges. They include a labor lawyer on the California Federal Court, a civil rights attorney on Brooklyn's Federal Court, and a reproductive rights lawyer on the Boston-based Appeals Court. These newly minted judges have progressive backgrounds to serve as a foil to the conservative direction the Supreme Court is leaning. We are learning more about what led police to the suspected serial killer charged in Long Island's Gilgo Beach murders more than a decade ago. 59-year-old architect Rex Heuermann pleaded not guilty Friday to charges he murdered 3 women. The victims' bodies were all found buried along the same stretch of beach in 2010. Prosecutors say Heuermann is also a prime suspect in the murder of a 4th woman whose body was found near the others. Heuermann's lawyer describes the evidence against him as circumstantial. CBS's Meg Oliver has the latest.
Investigators combed through the Long Island home of accused serial killer Rex Heuermann over the weekend.
To think this guy was roaming around our community for so long, it's truly frightening.
He was arrested outside of his Manhattan office Thursday.
Rex, did you do it?
Ladies and gentlemen, Rex Heuermann is a demon that walks among us.
Heuermann is charged with the murders of 3 women and, according to prosecutors, is the prime suspect in the murder of a 4th. Their bodies were found within a quarter mile of each other on Gilgo Beach in late 2010.
Mr. Heuermann had a double life. He had a family. He had a wife. He had 2 kids. He was an architect. And I guess at nighttime, he turned into this monster.
Court records say investigators honed in on him in early 2022 when they discovered he owned a car which witnesses tied to the disappearance of one of the women. They also found data from 7 burner phones he purchased, some of which he allegedly used to contact the victims who were believed to be sex workers. Police also uncovered over 200 internet searches pertaining to the Gilgo Beach investigation. They eventually obtained Heuermann's DNA earlier this year from a pizza crust he discarded in Midtown Manhattan. Prosecutors say they match it to hair found on one of the victims.
We still have a lot of outstanding victims out there from that Gilgo Beach area that we still want to investigate. We are not excluding him from being a part of those murders as well.
In addition to the 4 murders Heuermann is suspected of, the remains of 7 other people, including 5 women, were found in and around Gilgo Beach between 2010 and 2011. John Ray is a lawyer for 2 of those families.
So they're hopeful, of course, and optimistic at this point because of what's happened recently now. But at the same time, it caused a lot of pain because it's not over for them by any means.
Meg Oliver, CBS News,